In a world where entertainment is viewed as mindless diversion, only good for momentary distraction, one podcast has taken a stand, thoughtfully engaging the art of our day, dissecting the narrative, and pointing the people back to the greatest storyteller of all. You are about to enter a new world, and you will never view entertainment in the same way again. This is Popcorn Theology.
Welcome, movie lovers and theology nerds, to episode 323 of Popcorn Theology, where we examine films for where they align with the greatest story and our greatest storyteller, discussing what to receive, reject, and redeem for common ground, fruitful conversation, and mindful movie consumption. I'm James.
I'm Eric.
And with us is our very special guest and lifelong Godzilla fan, Greg Yertiger. Hey, Greg.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for having me.
Welcome, Greg.
Hello. Thank you.
It has been a while, and most people might not know Greg, but, in a very real sense, if not for Greg, there might not be a Cinemagogue book.
What?
Come on. I had Kickstarter supporters for the book back in the day.
Fair enough. Yes.
All right. So your at least connection to film and theology stuff has been around for more than a decade. Just saying.
For a bit. Yeah. Okay, I'm with you. We'll take that.
So a little bit about you, Greg, for our listeners. You have actually had opportunity to sort of dabble in the waters of pop culture and entertainment, right?
Yes, that is correct. I worked in the video game industry for 20 years, across a lot of different companies and predominantly just shipping games. Yeah.
So some cool games, right?
Yeah. I mean, Gears of War, Mass Effect,
nice.
Minecraft, Pokemon. I have quite a few different titles that I've worked on. And
Mass Effect, I think that's the way you got me into video games. Like it
was, and I highly suggest anybody should check it out. It's a phenomenal game, all three.
Yes. Well, and of course we have you on the show because you and I go back a ways, and so I knew, of course, that you are a massive G fan.
I am.
Yes. So I want to just want to throw that out there. We have three fairly strong Godzilla watchers and fans for this episode. So you're not going to the likelihood that we're going to have a lot of negative is probably pretty low. I think that's
but
very
also biased panel.
Yes. We don't pretend to be. We love Jesus. We love Godzilla. Those two things are not. That's definitely going to have a certain bent toward where this goes tonight. So, but I should also say a hearty hello to our Patron Saint live recording listeners as they trickle in. Great to have you and see what little insights that you have that might surface. For those who might be listening for the first time or not know about our Patreon supporters, you can become a patron saint of Popcorn Theology for as little as $1 a month. And that gets you a little insider track, including voting on some of our episodes. I think voting on our Christmas episode, which is coming up just before this one. So While You Were Sleeping, I believe, was picked and happened when. So that we're coming into the new year here with our Godzilla episode. And so you could be on January's theme and help pick what we're going to do for, again, just $1 a month. Also gets you like listening to live recordings and maybe having some of your insights show up on the show. So just a little bit of hopefully insight there and maybe a little impetus for some folks to join us supporting us in 2024 as we move into this year. But of course, we're talking about a film that has, in my opinion, probably one of my favorites of 2023, and that's Godzilla -1, directed, written, and with visual effects. This kind of blew me away. Because I looked up the data after I saw it. Like, directed, written, and with visual effects by Takashi Yamazaki. Like, that's a busy guy. I'm just saying. Obviously produced by Toho Studios. I think some people are confused. They're like, okay, is this Godzilla movie connected to Godzilla Kong? Is it connected to like what? What's it connected to? It's a Toho production and really kind of a reboot, distributed by Toho. It's their 33rd Godzilla film. So in film years, Godzilla is 33. It's a very holy number if we think about our Lord and Savior. But if we count the American films, it's actually 37 in the Godzilla franchise. And of course, this one is basically a reboot, reimagining, restart, whatever. It takes us all the way back to Godzilla's beginnings in the post-World War II era of Japan. So, Eric, why don't you give us the plot summary real quick?
All right. So, Shikishima, a surviving kamikaze pilot, is attacked on Odo Island alongside mechanics and engineers by a gargantuan monster. After surviving both the war and the monster attack, an overwhelming amount of guilt weighs on the young man, especially after a homeless woman and a baby move into his house when he returns. When the monster emerges with increased size and irradiated power, Shikishima finds himself alongside a large group of veterans who seek to take down the monster known as Gojira.
Oh, nice. You did a nice Japanese. And for the, I also have it on my shirt as we get on the shirt, just for all the people who watch this on the video. So before we get into the spoilers, we're going to give it our Popcorn Theology ratings. Most of you know how that goes. Greg, you're new, but you're somewhat aware. Instead of saying bad or good or great, we go with whether the movie, from a popcorn perspective, was stale, fresh, or buttered and salted. So, Greg, why don't you start and give us what you thought, and also a 1 minute reason why.
I'm going to go with buttered and salted, hands down.
Yeah.
This was one of the best films that I've seen in a long time. Solid Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. It never, I never feel like it kind of pulled off the gas, but it was a consistent, just journey through the whole thing. And I the thing that I like the most about it is that it felt like the Godzilla films I watched growing up, and it had all the right beats. And Godzilla looked great, and as always, was a force to be reckoned with.
True, I did love the design.
Oh yeah,
so Eric,
design was good.
Yes, yes. So Eric, over to you.
Mine was definitely tempura fried, which is another way of saying buttered and salted. So this was my favorite film of the year, and I didn't go back through and think, but probably my favorite Godzilla flick I've seen. And I say this with love, is like, in all honesty, if this wasn't a Godzilla film, I would have still enjoyed this film. Unlike the 2014 legendary film, this was like Godzilla only being a supporting actor in this film was actually kind of good and cool. The other ones, I wanted to see way more Godzilla. This one, he showed up at just the right amount of time.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, it'd be fun to get into that when we talk a little bit more about Godzilla films in general. But we are all three in agreement. So if there's anybody that does not enjoy this film, this is obviously a stacked deck, but I'm going buttered, salted, irradiated, and on fire. Easily in my top 5 Godzilla films of all time. And you're right. It's definitely, I haven't done a ranking for this year, but between this, like maybe Guardians 3, I've got a few that are in my tops for this year, but it's easily in the top 5, maybe top 3. It could wind up being number 1. Because I think while I love almost every Godzilla film out of a fondness for the character, this one really does have a solid story. And I'm not going to kid myself. A lot of the Godzilla films don't have solid stories. They're just fun. This one had a solid story, developed characters, and that back to basics approach that it kind of had. I think it does make it. I really revere that first film, and that the first 1954 Godzilla film was powerful in a way that really none of the subsequent films have been, because it was a very serious and sober film. And this is the first time that I feel like they've actually gone back to that, and in its own way, kind of equally powerful. Like I think if I did a comparison with 54 and 2023 Godzilla films, like they each have what I'd say is stronger points and maybe weaker points. But then overall, it's like I can't like they're both equal. Like we've actually got a film that equals the original from not quite a century ago, but 70 plus years. So man, and so the next part, of course, then is all right. How deep are the waters? No pun intended. A film's quality. I mean, a film can be great and wonderful and even our favorite of the year, but not necessarily have a lot of deep theological themes. And of course, then we compare that to our soda going into the movie theater. Was our theological soda diluted? or do we feel like this one's definitely carbonated, or do we feel like theme-wise, my cup runneth over? So, Greg, back to you for the first. What do you think we got to talk about on this one?
Cup runneth over. There were a lot of themes. None of them felt watered down or unresolved. And I feel like there's a lot to discuss without getting into too much of it. But I'm saying, like, is top quality without question.
Okay, Eric.
For me, is definitely a large glass of sake, cool sake on Odo Island. It's a great flick. So this is one of those films that it was hard to just nail down one main theme to talk about. You guys don't get to see it, but James put in our notes while we were preparing for the episode. I mean, 6, 7 different topics, and I think each of us then came up with a couple extra topics. It's a very, very overflowing glass. So I can't wait to get into the real stuff.
I'm curious between the choice between cool sake and hot sake for a Godzilla film.
Well, I'm just thinking more of the refreshingness of it, but still, they can go either way.
Yeah. I was gonna say the seas might be boiling on this one.
Right.
But, no, cup runneth over for sure, and I'll just try to be honest. It's like it's kind of shocking that a Godzilla film has so much to talk about. Like I say that as a lilifelong Godzilla fan. But
not since 1998 have the fans been so unified.
All right,
that's true.
Okay, like
let's
King
circle
Kong,
back on that one though.
Yes, I feel right now kind of like King Kong did in the third act of Godzilla Kong. Right now, I think I need some defibrillation, But no, we can't wait to talk about stuff. But before we get to the movie, just a couple things. We want to encourage you to help this episode be heard, kind of like a bellowing Godzilla roar. So make sure to like and share the episode with your friends. Let it echo through the heavens. And much like Kaiju Chasers, as many of our listeners are, I'm sure, if you want to know when a new episode of PT, Popcorn Theology, surfaces, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Discord, YouTube. You know all the stuff. And again, donating at least $1 a month could make you a patron saint. Kind of like becoming part of G-Force and give you special access to an exclusive Facebook group. Or maybe it's like being part of Monarch, although that's probably the wrong universe. But speaking of Monarch or other teams that have names and logos, don't forget it's almost Christmas time. Actually, when the time this episode drops, it is going to be the new year. So you need some new merch for a new year. Popcorn Theology has merch. Check out our merch store and buy some shirts and other things as well. And it looks like all three of us are on the G team, so I think we're all ready to delve deeper. So I will drop some ads and come back with a spoiler warning, and we will peel back the layers of Godzilla -1.
Popcorn Theology has been mindfully viewing cinema from a godly perspective since 2015. But why? Where did it come from? Well, one of the inspirations was our host James Harleman's book, Cinemagogue, published in 2012. Exploring the intersections between film and faith. And now, fresh off the press, is an updated edition of the book, the Cinemagogue Director's Cut. This version contains over 40 pages of new content with reviews and recommendations, movie references, illustrations, further shaping the story-formed argument for God's existence while also delving deeper on hot topics like how we deal with sex and nudity in film. It's the how-to guide for all things popcorn theology. And this time, it's not just available on Kindle and in paperback, but also a hardcover edition for all you true book lovers. So if you like movies, if you're a cinephile, if you spend hours talking film, this book is definitely for you. Or if you're a casual consumer who thinks movie making exists merely for diversion, this book may just change your life. Cinemagogue available now at Amazon.com. For bulk orders or signed copies, check out Cinemagogue.com for details.
Hey, this is James, and if you're listening to Popcorn Theology, it's because you're interested in movies, or theology, or best of all, both. And that probably means you're our kind of people, sharing things in common with our community, and maybe sharing common interests our listeners and viewers would be interested in as well. So why not partner with us and advertise your business or ministry right here on Popcorn Theology? We're looking for great, like-minded sponsors and offer reasonable rates with a variety of formats to get your message out. Remember, our fans aren't mindless consumers, so they'll give you thoughtful consideration. That's big part of what we're all about. So for more information on advertising with us, contact info@popcorntheology.com. And we're back, dropping the spoiler warning as we dig deeper into Godzilla -1, ready to talk about all of, well, I guess we'll start with our popcorn thoughts. Let's go ahead and pop ourselves a nice bag of fun, fluffy Godzilla action. And we should probably discuss the franchise, or the IP, I guess now as we say it, as a whole first. So Eric, I know Greg's relationship with Godzilla. So like, let us and the listeners know kind of your background.
So my background is I grew up watching Godzilla, King of the Monsters, ! To not be confused with the more recent one, Godzilla, King of the Monsters, that came out. And that's the version. It's the original Japanese version with the Raymond Burr scenes, added into it. I was texting my dad the other day. I was like, they did a really great job of that, like putting him into that movie. But granted, this was the generation that faked the moon landing. So, I mean, of course they could do it with a Godzilla movie.
Sure. I mean, they can fake anything.
But no, so I loved this movie growing up. I didn't understand all the metaphor for war and stuff like that. I just watching it for Godzilla. So it's like, even when my younger brothers and I, we would decide which movie we wanted to watch, we would do kind of like a sports tournament bracket. So we'd start over here and we'd vote on this one, vote on this one, and whichever one won, move to the next round. And I always knew how to weight it just right, put in enough tier that I would actually put like 1 seed versus 1 seed. In my opinion, it was a first seed together instead of, it's supposed to be first seed, 16 seed, yada, yada. Just so that I would weight it enough to knock out some of the better movies, quote unquote, so that we could watch Godzilla. I don't know how many times. There were many times it won where I was the only one of the three of us that actually wanted it to win. But I just knew if I could weight it a certain way. So I absolutely,
king of the movie watching game. Like, that's pretty
much.
Nice.
Pretty much. We watched it a ton. We never watched. We watched occasionally some of, like, if we could find them in the library, the local library. We would watch some of the older, I guess maybe 70s, 80s versions where it's a little bit more live action cartoony and stuff like that. But I knew
Googly-eyed Godzilla.
Exactly. So I knew who, like, Mothra was. I know I had seen the original one with Mothra in it. Seen a couple of the other ones here or there. So, but I was more of the, like, the original, and then as, like, some of the more modern stuff started to come, I started to get back into it and started backfilling. So I knew who Mothra was. I knew who King Ghidorah was. So I was always kind of there, but I was never able to always get my hands on the stuff to actually watch. Favorite types of Godzillas? I've never liked, I shouldn't say never. I don't like them as an anti-hero. I like them as that unstoppable force of nature that throws humanity for a loop, and they have to deal with this issue of Godzilla, that he's not this anti-hero. He's an unstoppable force of nature. And I will say I'm about to say some heresy here. Granted, I probably haven't seen this movie in probably 24 years. But I loved Godzilla 1998, and it was probably just because I was in a Godzilla desert when it came out, and I was only like 12, 13 or something like that. So you give the kid a break, But we used to watch that all the time.
Totally. 12. Of course, you can always forgive 12-year-old ignorance. I'm just. Are you the one? You're the one that keeps vying for us to do that at some point.
I've thrown it out there multiple times, and unfortunately, I'm the only one that ever votes for it, so it doesn't make it anywhere.
Well, I think you want to just get us to do it just to pain me, right? Really just. You want to hurt me? That's what I think.
I mean,
right?
For the record, if it was not called Godzilla, but called, like, Monster in Manhattan, I think that people would have had a vastly different thought about it. It's like, this is a cool big. It's kind of like Godzilla, but it's totally not Godzilla.
It's an American Godzilla. Yeah.
It's like watching Cloverfield, which is one of my favorite almost Godzilla movies, the found footage film. It's like that's a fantastic film. That was like Matt Reeves' breakthrough. Now he gives us the Batman. I mean, he gave us like Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Like, I love Matt Reeves. That was his, but he didn't have the gall to call it Godzilla. I was like, that's not Godzilla. I'm sorry.
Right.
No, if they called it, if that was a remake of The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, it was shout out to Ray Harryhausen with some classic monster film. like which was a creature that attacked New York. I was like, yeah, you could call it that. Yeah, it was
sure.
But now Godzilla's French. I mean, come on.
Yeah, come on. Don't mess with our boy, man. Come on. Don't mess with our boy. Like, you just wanted to get butts in seats. We get it, but come on.
Oh. So okay, so you are 100% forgiven, Eric. And sometime if I believe we call him Gyno. It's Godzilla in name only. Godzilla in name only. Gino. But yeah. So Greg, you may have. It's too weird for me to ask. So what do you think? Like I know. So just tell the listeners your G history.
So starting out for me, I grew up in Southern California, and we would go to my great aunt's house on like the weekend, and I was the only kid, and so I would just plop down in front of the TV, and there was always Godzilla there. And the thing, I was never like into it at that age to be enough to know like who King Ghidorah is, or who any of these. They were just the other wrestler, right? Like in the fight.
Okay.
And what it came down to is that the thing that I think that really made me gravitate towards Godzilla was that he was the only monster that wasn't scary. Like, he wasn't Jason. He wasn't Freddy Krueger. But he was still the king of monsters. And so it was like, I liked him because then I got to see Godzilla in a different way. I got to see him as, it's like, well, he's a monster and he does monster stuff. And like, Eric, like you're mentioning, like sometimes he comes in and he's a force to be reckoned with. And other times he sort of, comes in, fights the other monster, and then slinks back into the ocean. And it's like, all right, did my job. You guys are fine. Figure it out. Right. Like, but for me, it was that, yeah, he's the king of monsters, but he wasn't terrifying. And it made it something that it became approachable for me. And just it always stuck with me. It's like, think of every monster. Godzilla's the king. That's it. That was what was ingrained in me, is that, look, great, Ghidorah, you can say you're king, but like, come on. We know who the king is.
False King Ghidorah.
We know who the king is. It's Godzilla, and that's always been just part of my sort of Godzilla journey, is that he's got some off days sometimes where he just messes up the city, and he's got other days where he saves the city, and in the end it's like he's the king of the monsters, and that is what really drew me to him. And I played some of the video games that came out back in the day. Like, they had some side-scrolling kind of, you played Godzilla and you're fighting the other monsters, and it was pretty good. I wouldn't mind seeing another Godzilla film or game come out, but that's just because I like games a lot. But yeah, for me, that is my journey, man. It's just it's me following the king of monsters and going, dude, yeah, you're the king. Keep doing cool stuff, man.
Did you ever see Godzilla versus Bambi?
I did many times. I think that was on Saturday Night Live originally.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think that's where it came from, like the Mr. Bill era.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, wow.
I think.
I'm sure it's on YouTube.
I forget which VHS it was that it always played on the front. It was like Bambi versus Godzilla, and then look it up, people. It's a fantastic
look it up if you're not
fight. It's a fantastic fight. Yeah,
seriously, hands down, one of the best.
I had a pretty interesting it's kind of like you, Greg. I remember seeing sort of like Saturday matinee versions of like the 70s movies growing up, and I'm not even sure if I saw the original first or what I saw first, but it was the old stuff. And my 8-year-old self loves the 60s, 70s kind of googly-eyed Godzilla era. I can always watch it and just have fun with it. I love his sort of swinging drop kick where he just sort of like lifts his feet up and flies through the air.
And just flies. Yeah.
Yes, like his tail dragging on the floor. But honestly, I was actually, I really cut my teeth. There was an 80s cartoon that was modeled after Scooby-Doo. They had a mini Godzilla called Godzuki, and they would solve mysteries, but then they could call Godzilla from their boat, and Godzilla would pop up out of the water and fight monsters. And
was that the Up from the Depths?
30 stories high.
30 stories high.
Fire, his head in the sky. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a great.
I too watched that. Yeah.
But then actually, I actually collected. I actually have back here. I have the Marvel Comics series where he fought the Fantastic Four, the Avengers. I mean, he was fully in the MCU. Mostly Shield was actually trying to contain him as he moved his way through the U.S. And actually started. Then there was also the James Godzilla era, where he started drawing his own comics.
Nice.
And did his own little Godzilla comics. But I honestly, I agree with probably. I think I agree with you, Greg, as far as new stuff. We were talking about it earlier, like King of the Monsters, the Michael Dougherty film that came out a few years ago, that was a love letter to lifelong fans,
without question.
Like from the characters, Mothra, Ghidorah, all the people we've talked about, even to the music cues, to even just every frame of that movie is a painting if you just freeze frame it. It was just this sort of gorgeous love letter. Even if you could debate the plot, everything else, but honestly, the plot was wonky enough that it was a love letter to all the classic Godzilla films. So
it also has one of the greatest lines in all of cinema: "Let them fight." That's
so
why
the
I'm
legendary
here.
stuff.
That's
is all
why
good.
I'm here.
Right. You know me.
That's
Let's go.
But I'm actually a big fan of the Heisei series, which, if you are a Godzilla fan, so they did a seven series run in the 90s. It only acknowledged the first film, but then it was sort of a 90s series, kind of like the Fast and Furious movies. You had like 7 movies, and you actually kind of got the life, death, and legacy of Godzilla. And it was this very cool 90s era series that Toho put out. And that's probably still, I love the legendary stuff, but that's probably still my favorite just because it hits every note of why I love Godzilla, from him being, he can be harsh, but he also then is territorial. Like kind of like you were saying, Eric. And I think between Eric, you talked about how frightening he was. Greg, like he wasn't. Like I feel like that series cut right down the middle. It's like he is both terrifying, but at times he is taking out other things that that you don't need to fear because he's taking care of them. And there's a very godlike aspect of Godzilla where, right now he is terrifying. But maybe in certain circumstances, he's taking down things that you're afraid of that you don't need to fear because he takes care of them. And there's something very godlike about that. So let's get to this film then. So Eric, why did you think this film was buttered and salted? Why is this one so good? Now that we've dropped the spoiler warning, free for all, favorite moments, standout stuff. What'd you have?
Yeah, so from the popcorn side, standout moment was absolutely when Godzilla used his atomic breath on the city. Yeah, I mean that was
crazy.
That how everything went, how it went silent completely, then exploded, and you saw, in all honesty, at that moment, I was like, wow. This movie didn't focus too much overall on the bomb, everything. But really, that's probably one of the best depictions that I've seen anywhere. I've seen a lot of movies that have atomic bombs that destroy cities and stuff like that, but this is probably one of the most terrifying of just showing the sheer power behind him. Definitely.
Sure. Yeah. Who? I don't even remember Oppenheimer. Did that even come out this year? Like we got the real atomic bomb. There we go. We got
exactly.
Godzilla.
Well, I mean, this was a sequel to Oppenheimer, so
fair enough. Yep.
Yeah. So
technically true.
Yes, technically true. Yeah. So definitely the best atomic breath that I've ever seen. And on top of the movie, it covers shame, cowardice, family, willing to die for honor, but then willing to live for the future. Things you don't get to see that often in a lot of films. And then to top it all off, the cherry on top of all things is it co-stars Godzilla. In his best supporting role he's done to date is Godzilla. I did have a few issues here and there, which is a little bit of pacing and stuff like that. I get a feeling, I haven't done too much research, I get a feeling that the Japanese culture is a very literal type of culture, very much a let me tell you and show you type of thing. So one example where I noticed that a little bit of disconnect on just filmmaking anyways was they had to show the telegram courier handing the telegram to the lady at the end there, and then her showing up and giving the telegram, and it was like, Americans, we would just cut that scene and just, oh, here's a telegram at the end, and everyone on the message boards would have been like, when did she get the message? Da da da. It's like, so I get why they do it, but it's just little things like that, probably a little bit of cultural differences, but overall, I thought it was fantastic on the popcorn side, and then obviously when we get to the theology side.
Nice. So, Greg, from the popcorn perspective, why is this so high on the list of Godzilla films?
Because it was really cool seeing a young Godzilla. I liked Godzilla being folklore, right? Some rumored thing that he's this, up from the depths, 30 stories high. They're like, whatever. He's not whatever. But then he shows up, and that's what he is, and it was nice to see that, and I felt that they doubled down on his destructive capabilities. Yeah. This was not someone to mess with, and the I'm powering up thing to then I'm gonna fire, that just added even more oomph to it.
So you're a fan of the popping spikes then?
I love the popping spikes, man. Come on. Because it builds up that thing. He's like, what is he going to do? Oh, he's going to nuke everyone. Just back off. And I really like Shimiziki's work buddies. I love their closeness. Sort of, against the backdrop of destruction. It was really nice getting it so that he could have friends that all had their own roles within the sort of group dynamic. But I really enjoyed the friends, especially like the dinner scene where they're just kind of hanging out saying, come on, marry her, quit being an idiot. Like,
man up.
Like, come on. Like, this is, and Akiko's like sitting in the captain's lap, and they're just enjoying each other's company. I really, really like that. I feel that if that aspect wasn't in the film, I feel like Shimiziki would have been much more dour. It would have just been this. It would have just been so much internal struggle, but without them being comedy relief, they were a relief to a degree.
So it would have been a James movie, is what you're saying, otherwise.
It would have been a James movie. Yeah.
Sorry. That's a little insider thing between us.
We'll definitely get into what that is another time, but
yeah.
There are James films. Like, oh no, dude, this is a James film.
If a film is too dour, Greg tells me it's a James movie. So
it's a James film.
All right.
Yeah. So this splits the difference. It's a James and Greg film. That's good.
Yes, without question.
Okay. Well, I thought it was pretty wonderful too. I thought that they did a good job of making it honoring and respectful to the original 1954 Godzilla. Which, Eric, if you've only seen the one with Raymond Burr, you really should. You can find and watch the original Gojira.
I had started watching it, but I just watched Shin. I just watched Shin on subtitles in the Japanese because the dubbing is horrendous. And so I started to watch it, but then I was like, then I got busy with stuff. But it's literally half played, and I was like, well, I've seen this scene, but I do know the plot. I do know the plot is different. But yeah.
Well, yeah, there's a very different love triangle and focus on characters, and I mean, you're not wrong. The American version did a good job of splicing him in. In fact, I feel like the reporters on the top of the building in this movie are kind of almost an homage, like a shout out to the Raymond Burr stuff, where like because they insert this reporter guy who's there, and so they have these guys on the building who are like, and we're reporting on the thing, even though he's about to knock us down and destroy us. We're just going to keep standing here.
He knocks over the cultural landmark. Like, really detailed.
But even down to things like that, the 54 version was actually really interesting. The way they updated it, in the 1954 version, they had this very sci-fi thing called an oxygen destroyer that they came up with. Here they tried to ground it. It was almost like Christopher Nolan making a Godzilla movie. It's like, okay, we can't have it be something weird scientific or weird sci-fi like that. we'll come up with Freon or something a little more grounded in reality that makes you almost think it could work. And so like that felt like they were like totally respecting the story of the original, but trying to find ways to make it different and also a little more just authentic and believable. And this is one of those few movies where let's all admit, a show of hands, all you listeners, we often just humor the human scenes waiting for the Godzilla scenes.
Yes.
And this is one of the few movies where
all right, fine.
We don't have to do that. Like, and this is where the film, like you're talking about co-star, Eric, Godzilla being a co-star. I feel like Godzilla is Jaws in this movie.
Yes.
Because this movie is Jaws. I mean, down to
literally,
we need a bigger boat. They literally they stick the thing in its mouth, and he has to shoot the canister that's in it. It's like, smile, you son of a Godzilla! Like you've got all of the Jaws moments in this movie, and so that kind of fascinated, which is also one of my favorite films. So it's like, okay, you just made Godzilla / like 1954 Godzilla's cross-referenced with Jaws, brought up to speed with modern. It's kind of hitting all of my favorite things. So, and man, talk about even like making you appreciate the humans when Noriko pushes Shimiziki out of the way of the nuclear blast. I've teared up in a few Godzilla movies when something's happening to Godzilla, but
I think we all have.
I don't think I've ever teared up or gotten severely choked up about something happened to human characters in a Godzilla film until this movie.
No.
Like when I realized what was going to happen there, when I realized she was going to Independence Day him and push him into an alley, like we all learned from Independence Day. If you jump into an alley like a dog jumping into the alley,
the fire just goes right by.
If you just push him into an alley, the nuclear blast won't get him. Sure, there's still some cheesy stuff in the movie, but
excuse me,
but it was still so emotional. I was like, oh, I cannot think that. Considering, of course, all the context of that relationship we'll get into. Oh man, and I almost wasn't sure how I felt about her surviving because
it felt kind of out of left field, in my opinion. It felt like it took some of the weight off of what potentially his growth would have been living for the girl now versus now living for both of them.
My take on that was that it was really required for him because she was a part of his traumatic PTSD kind of journey, and she was the one that comforted him multiple times.
Yeah.
And so he knew that the war wasn't over, but he needed, who else was he going to say it to? But understand, looking at the destruction, movie magic, fine. I have no idea how she survived that. God is good, cool, but I think that's like what I mentioned before. Like everything was ultimately kind of resolved, but to me, I think that it was more about Shimizuki's journey and him being able to have someone to relate to and to speak to about, and that understood the depths other than the mechanic. Mechanic understood, but that was different, right? Like their plot point sort of wrapped up with the ejector seat.
Yeah.
And him being happy. But otherwise it would have just been like, who's he going to say that the war is over? Like his internal struggle has ended.
True.
Well, and to your point, Greg, about things about this movie being less bleak than perhaps a James movie. Like I was totally happy with this movie, having her, like, at first I was like, what? And I was like, you know what? No, I feel like this movie has to have an element of redemption and restoration. And she was still pretty messed up. Like, she lost an eye.
Oh yeah.
She looked pretty damaged. And let's not forget, she survived, but strangely enough, has some strange black mark creeping up her neck. Dun, dun, dun.
So we'll find out in the sequel. I Googled it. I was like, what was that scene? Because I was like, sure, I saw something. And people were like, oh, it's radiation sickness. I was like, I don't think
radiation
they'd be showing
sickness
us
doesn't
radiation
look like
sickness.
that.
Yeah.
No,
weird.
She would not have hair.
I don't know what's happening there. So we will see. But we're sort of bumping up against theology territory and some of the deeper things. So let's pour ourselves a glass of theology soda. and let's get back into a little bit of the deeper stuff, because this film really is. I mean, this film is a character study, a cultural study, and giant kaiju action. So I mean, it's got a little bit of everything. But let's go ahead and dig a little bit deeper. And we've already kind of almost referenced lightly a bunch of these different themes. But Greg, it's probably best to start with the one that kind of you came up with, which is it's specific to this film, but probably also kind of generally attached to a lot of Godzilla films. So throw it out, man.
So Godzilla was created to help the Japanese people learn how to cope with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Like there's a deeper vein that exists with Godzilla, that he's not just this guy in a suit, but this is a coping mechanism. This is a help us to deal with the fact that we got nuked. Godzilla's always been tied to war or combat in some respect. But in -1, World War II's over. And the people in the film are trying to get on with their lives. Similarly to how we're told that a number of people died in air raids, right? No one sees the bombs coming, the destruction that follows. Sure, people see Godzilla, right? But the coming destruction he brings is the same as a city being bombed. Always. Honestly, I'm pretty sure, and please don't take this as I'm being heretical in any way, but I'm saying this rings true as I read through it. I'm pretty sure that Job 41 is all about Godzilla.
I agree.
But we can discuss that in a minute. But Godzilla's ability to regenerate continues that haunting theme that war never ends. And Godzilla, you cannot ever kill him. And that's the struggle, right? Is that he's a constant reminder of war and destruction, and he's not someone that can be destroyed. Like, let me give you a tangential example. So there's a board game that James got me, actually, that's Godzilla Tokyo Smash, where you play one of 4 kaiju and you fight each other, but no one takes damage. Instead, you lose abilities, and those count as points. But in that sense, it's like within this universe, all creatures, all of the enemies, they're never going to die. Why? Because they're all a shadow of war. They're all this haunting thing of unknown destruction that is coming for you.
Yeah. Well, I feel like in one way, maybe this movie even got at that a little bit more. Again, Eric, I think if you watch the non-Americanized version of Godzilla, and Greg, you could correct me if you think I'm off here, but I really think if you watch the Japanese version of the old 54 Godzilla is America.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and that's the other bit.
Yeah.
Because they got stomped on by America, and they complained about it in film through metaphor. But Godzilla was which to me is a little bit less than what you're talking about, Greg. And so I feel like in some ways this movie maximized this movie transcended the first movie in one way, because I do think Godzilla was a veiled metaphor for the American superpower that came in and trounced them. And I feel like this movie kind of threw that out in favor of just saying, no, he's even bigger than that. Yes. Because in some ways, this movie, corporately and personally, it almost feels like Godzilla is a recompense for their own sins and their own bloodthirstiness. And they're like, it's much more general. And I feel that's better. You know, like instead of being a very specific metaphor, he becomes a more general metaphor, which I think other movies, I think in general, he already had become that, but this movie just says, no, it's like watching Toho go back and say, no, he's bigger than just America. The Spectre is much greater than one nation. And
I think you see that in the, I'll just call it the preaching section of the film, because all films have to get the preaching section where the scientist is laying out the plans, and he's talking about all the death and destruction of of what's happened during the war. Talking about World War II, and then they start talking. Honestly, it felt one of those things, right? The message that they were preaching in that part was like, this is actually very applicable to an American audience. It's actually a very American message, which is, their thing is like, the Japanese government is not coming to help us. The American government, they're not coming to help us. If we're going to win the day, then it's going to be through the private citizenry. And I think that's kind of like, I don't know Japanese culture too much. I haven't studied them too much, but from some of the things that I've seen coming out of them on the geopolitical scale, is basically they're like, we have a decreasing population, and we need our citizens to kind of like step up. And so I was seeing a lot of this in this film of, all right, citizens, like the government's done everything it can do. The other foreign governments of the world that we've relied on for years, they're done too. They're not going to come and help us. So we've got to do something ourselves if we're going to survive. And I thought that in this context of the film, how they did it was that group of ingenuity, and I thought it ended up being great and had a very touching moment at the end too.
The other bit that was kind of cool, that was really subtle, was that they mentioned that the 4 ships that they were going to have were going to be given to the UN.
Yeah.
Because one of the things in the charter that was signed that ended the war stated that Japan had to get rid of, they couldn't have an army anymore. And we had to get rid of all of their stuff. So I liked that little, it was a little like history nerd bit there for a second, but it's like, oh no, cool, that happened. Yeah. Sorry.
Again, but to that Japanese culture, the literal sense, like American history nerd, if the ships had just been there, be like, where'd they get the ships? They were giving all the ships to the UN, but they were like, no, plot hole, potential plot hole, fill the hole.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I don't want to get too far away from your assertion, though, that the Bible actually was prophesying Godzilla.
I'm telling you, Job 41 is about Godzilla.
You talked about bringing that up, and I kind of thought, you know what? I think for the listeners, just to prove the point, I think we should all actually take the amount of time. I think if anybody who's seen this film, or if they're for some reason listening to the spoilers and haven't seen Godzilla -1, but at least know Godzilla, I mean, I guess, but you should really just stop right now, go watch it, and come back. But
yes, we'll wait.
Yeah, hang on, we'll wait. Okay. But I actually want to, it's not that long if we each take turns. And I think like everybody, listeners, turn on close your eyes and think of Godzilla and listen to the verses in Job 41 as we read a few sections. I'll grab the first one. I'll give Greg the best one, and then and Eric, you can finish this up. Even though all scripture is equal, and I shouldn't be saying this.
God breathed. It's all
there
good.
You go. God breathed. All right. So Job 41. I feel like we need a Godzilla roar to kick it off, but can you draw out Leviathan with a fishhook, or press down his tongue with a cord? Can you put a rope in his nose, or pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he make many pleas to you? Will he speak to you with soft words? Will he make a covenant with you to take him for your servant forever? Will you play with him as with a bird, or will you put him on a leash for your girls? Will traders bargain over him? Will they divide him among the merchants? Can you fill his skin with harpoons, or his head with fishing spears? Lay your hands on him, remember the battle, you will not do it again. Behold, the hope of a man is false. He is laid low even at the sight of him. No one is so fierce that he dares to stir him up.
Who can open the door of his face? Around his teeth is terror. His back is made of rows of shields, shut up closely as with a seal. One is so near to another that no air can come between them. They are joined to one another. They clasp each other and cannot be separated. His sneezes flash forth light. His eyes are like the eyelids of dawn. Out of his mouth go flames, torches, sparks of fire leap forth. Out of his nostrils comes forth smoke, as from a boiling pot and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and the flame that comes from his mouth. His neck abides strength, and terror dances before him.
The folds of his flesh stick together, firmly cast on him and immovable. His heart is hard as a stone, hard as the lower millstone. When he raises himself, the mighty are afraid. At the crashing they are beside themselves. Though the sword reaches him, it does not avail, nor the spear, the dart, or the javelin. He counts iron as straw and bronze as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make him flee. For him, sling stones are turned to stubble. Clubs are counted as stubble. He laughs at the rattle of javelins. His under parts are like sharp pot shards. He spreads himself like a threshing sled on the mire. He makes the deep boil like a pot. He makes the sea like a pot of ointment. Behind him he leaves a shining wake. One would think deep to be white-haired. On earth there is not his like, a creature without fear. He sees everything that is high. He is king over all the sons of pride. Woo! That is Godzilla.
I mean, it's hard to deny. He literally he breathes fire. I was just like, that's.
For years, I would show this passage to friends. Like, the Bible talks about dragons, and I would show this to them. For now on, I would be like, Gojira,
Godzilla.
Right here.
Yeah.
Well, it's uncanny how much this description fits, right? I mean, I doubt that the Japanese creators way back in the 50s, like, I doubt they're like, let's make this creature based on Job 41, which I read yesterday.
Right.
Like, I don't think that happened, but this is where I do believe. This is where general revelation kicks in, I believe, in a specific way. Like, even if you've never read Job 41, I think an aspect of this resonates in our hearts, souls, and minds. And I think I was actually just seeing if we'll link to. I think we will link to it in the show notes. But Miles Wallace, one of our other hosts, sent me a link to a video by the Bible Project talking about the Chaos Dragon and how in ancient cultures there was this idea of the Chaos Dragon and something that would be in the deep waters that you should be terrified of. And it was like, I even think you start thinking about, oh yeah, well, there's the Midgard serpent in Norse mythology that would eventually, that's Ragnarok, right? It comes up, I think it takes down Odin. I think like Thor has to fight the Midgard serpent at the end of days. I'm not totally straight on all my Norse mythology. Shame on me for not, knowing all my false gods.
They lost. So
yeah, exactly. But yeah, like, you see this. That's Godzilla is tapping in. Even modern myths like Cthulhu. You have this godlike creature who's in the depths, sleeping until someday he will awaken and terrorize mankind. Like that. We have this idea, and of course, I mean, the point of Job, for any listeners who might not know, right? That passage in Job, God is setting up. Okay, you can't even handle this chaos, and I'm even more powerful than that chaos. Yeah. Right? Like I'm way above that. And so who are you to talk to me? It's like the only thing bigger than Godzilla is God, right? That's the gist.
It's like the song from VeggieTales. God is bigger than the boogeyman. He's bigger than Godzilla or the monsters on TV.
All right.
Wait, the VeggieTales reference Godzilla?
Nice.
I had no idea.
Yes, they do.
Awesome.
But understand, King of Kings.
Yes.
Okay, like, it still fits.
That's
Godzilla's still king of the monsters.
But Godzilla's
it all
the
works
king of
out.
Kings. There you go. Yeah, no, that totally works. That totally works. Oh my gosh. Well, I want to swing back. I mean, as far as Godzilla being a metaphor for this Spectre of War, like you brought up for us, Greg.
Yeah.
I love how the movie ends. Then, like where is war? Like the movie also let us know pretty clearly, war is not just like crisis happening that we hear in the news. Like, war is in our hearts and war is in our minds. And that was something I thought the film did really well at doing, because if even just skip to the end, like, he walks in and finds Noriko in the end, and her line to him is your war finally over? I was like the war wasn't over. I loved how this, like, Godzilla almost becomes the specter of PTSD, the specter of what haunts us at night, the specter of the fact that we can't leave behind our past or our war or our war-induced trauma. And I think that that was significant and beautiful to me.
I mean, even just in the idea that I'd mentioned earlier that Godzilla wasn't this scary monster, like he embodies terror, but it's in a different way. For me, as little kid in Southern California, it didn't fit right. But I'm saying, if you look at the narrative as it stands, he is capital I, capital S, the stalking terror. Full stop. There is no one else. He's it.
Yeah. Well, and he sort of he shows up. I mean, the movie's narrative gives us Shimiziki, right? He does something which is considered kind of a trespass at the beginning of the movie, and little Godzilla shows up and just keeps getting bigger. So it almost becomes this. There's a war going on. It reminded me of Romans 7:23. Where it says, I see another law at work in me, waging war against the law of my mind and making me a prisoner of the law of sin at work within me. What a wretched man I am! Who will rescue me from this body that is subject to death? Like Godzilla almost represents his inner war. Like he shows up after he's committed what seems to be a trespass, and just it keeps getting bigger for him throughout the movie, and until he of course has to face it down, and it just. I love that it was basically saying, wait, like the beauty is not having to face that, right? I mean, like they even say to that one guy, he's like, to have never gone to war is something to be proud of. Like war should not be glamorized. Like war is something we want to cease, right? Like biblically, we want the Prince of Peace to put an end to every war, external and our internal war. Like we want him to, like we want that all put to death. We want the chaos gone. We want the monster put to bed, and we want to be. I mean, we want the Godzilla kind of the movies you're talking about, Greg. Like we want the sort of king of kings or the king of the monster, like king above all the other monsters to come in, put them to bed, and we want the most terrifying thing to kill our terrifying things, and give us peace. Like, and that's what this movie is toying with this idea on a level I feel most Godzilla movies haven't quite got to in such a beautiful way.
But ultimately, once the King of Kings deals with the other ones, I want the King of Kings to make it so that we can still be friends with Godzilla in some way. Right. Like, I don't want him gone. I just want to still hang out with him. Well, I think it'd be a good time.
He shouldn't slink back off into the sea. He should,
Yeah. Go ahead.
If at the end of days, Godzilla was a worthy king who followed the king, then Godzilla will take his crown off and he'll give it to Christ and he'll be honored.
There you go.
He'll be there, right there with us. He'll be Kingzilla instead of Godzilla because that's a little blasphemous. He'd have
difficulty. He'd have difficulty getting it off with the little arms, but
tiny little arms. Yeah.
Well, so let's go ahead and roll on then, Eric, because we're talking about sort of Shimiziki's struggle. So I know that was a theme that stood out to you. So where was your mind kind of focused on with the movie as far as major themes?
Yeah, so my major theme that I was thinking through as I was just trying to like, how can you make this? There's themes that are great, wonderful themes, but I was like, well, how do I find that practical theme? How do I find that theme that applies to me walking out of the movie theater? How can I kind of apply this to my life? I was just thinking of how I do this with quotation marks, how a small lapse in character leads to a life of misery. And so it starts with when you don't deal with sin when it's small, it will come back stronger, and the consequences are always greater than that. I mean, think about, something that a lot of men struggle with is something like pornography. There's ways to head it off way ahead of time versus multiple years down the road where your marriage is now in shambles because of that, where if you had just stopped it when you were 13 and gotten help before you ever started the habit, it would have been easier to deal with back then versus years down the road when now it's wrecked your life and you can't have any type of meaningful relationship because you're constantly viewing the world through this lens of your own sin. And so I have James.
So if you handled your porn problem before Bikini Atoll, and the
yes,
the nuclear moment.
Yes, before the bikinis
your problem
came
would
out.
not have become nuclear.
Yes.
How dare you?
Exactly.
That fits. I'm just saying.
Yeah, it does. It does
actually
fit. It does fit. So
I deal with this all the time.
Yeah. No, I was like, I'm getting used to it more. I was like, I have a lot of brothers. I'm used to being interrupted for nonsense statements. Yeah, no. But no, I did put as a Bible verse is James 1 verse 14 and 15. And everyone knows this verse is probably one of the most famous verses in the Bible is, but each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it is conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. And this, obviously, you can apply this to this film, this Godzilla here, is like when you don't pluck out your eye, Christ tells you to, when you don't recognize that root of sin, particularly as I'm thinking about like a seed starts there and it breaks and those roots start to go out. If you don't recognize the roots of that, if you're only looking at what's above the surface, you are dooming yourself and all of those around you to the point that your experience of sin, it does cloud your entire worldview. Everything. And for this film, for Shikishima, he couldn't even be happy. The war was done. The physical, actual war was done. Obviously, what we were just talking about, PTSD, all these other things. The war was done, but he couldn't be happy because he had been a coward during the war, and he had failed to attack Godzilla when Godzilla was small. And so now he even sees Godzilla coming James has mentioned it. Godzilla shows up because he was a coward to punish him in his own mind, and he has a moment to try to be redeemed right there. That 30 millimeter gun, I think it was, or 20 meters. Like, what was the thing? It's like, I won't do anything at it. Oh, 20 millimeter will kill anything. And it's like that.
But that's the fallacy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
prayer will kill anything.
At that point, I'm not even sure that we can be sure. Like, he hadn't been irradiated. Did he have a regenerating factor? Like, we don't know. Like,
yes,
because
he got nuked at Bikini Atoll and became what he did. Yes, clearly.
Well, so I'm taking the mindset of Shikishima of this, not of anything like that.
We can nerd out. Sorry.
In all honesty, I agree with you because I thought about the same thing. Because my instinct to the other guy was like, how do you know that? That gun's going to kill them.
When I read your thing in the show notes, I'm like, no, but that's the great fallacy that then follows him with the mechanic is that it's like the mechanic believed so strongly that those guns would have stopped him. It's like, no. You cannot. Like, it's not going to happen. And even when you look at the other ship attacking him, those were way bigger than 20 millimeter rounds. Sorry to interrupt. Please continue.
No, it's good points. It's good points.
But I'll argue though, like, but we're importing our legacy knowledge of Godzilla into that moment. Did small Godzilla really have the same moxie? Like, would he have been injured or at least driven back into the sea by those guns? I guess we can't really know because we never saw it.
We can know because of one event.
Okay.
The event is the Bikini Atoll.
Right.
Where they let off a nuke on little Godzilla.
Yeah.
And it became bigger Godzilla.
Let's see that.
Meaning that those guns...
that gave him those powers.
Oh, I see what you're
saying. Theoretically, at least, yeah.
The radiation could have given him those powers. We don't know what little Godzilla did or didn't have. And we can never know.
Yeah, so I can't. Unless we talk to the guys, we don't know. I got you. Forgive me. Continue.
Get Toho on the phone. Let's get Toho on the phone.
Yeah, call him right now. Come on, James. You know people.
But I think to Eric's point, even if maybe we won't overcome, like, we're always called to struggle against what is. I think this is a metaphor for sin. We're always called to struggle against it, even if we don't have the strength. We're called to struggle, right? So he's aching in that failure.
Yes,
whether it would have been effective or not, we can't know. But he's aching in the wake of that failure. So back to your point, it absolutely worked.
Whether it would have been successful or not, that cowardness That flaw, that small flaw in his character, is what's keeping him going. Is he feels like it's haunting him, and you see that with the pictures. He keeps going back to the pictures and looking at the pictures. So because he had failed to do his duty, he was viewing the entire world at that point through that lens of his own personal sin, and he unquestionably accepted that he was cursed. He just accepted it. He was like, I was a coward. Yeah. Godzilla showed up, killed all those men because I was a coward twice in the same day. I was a coward as a kamikaze. I was a coward, to try to shoot Godzilla. Years later, I finally make the decision to be happy. Finally make it. Next day, Godzilla shows up and destroys everything. And so he's in that mindset. And it's a powerful mindset. I won't read the whole thing, but Colossians 3 verse 1 through 11, it ends there with here there is not Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave, free, but Christ is all in all. And the reason why I bring up Colossians 3 is because as Christians, when you're in this despair, this worldview of sin, and you're believing you're cursed and everything you're doing is God or nature or your ancestors coming after you for these things, sometimes you need to go away from, you need to get freed from that mindset of sin that you are being actively punished as a Christian. Sometimes you are. You are disciplined as Hebrews says, like God disciplines those whom he loves, but he doesn't curse you outright the way that someone like Shikishima was viewing it. And so this is that corrected view of that Colossians 1 through 11 is get that proper view of where you are now as a Christian, and now you're in Christ. And so being in Christ, you are now free from your home culture's honor shame scale. Because that's really what was going on with Shikishima is because he was a coward. I mean, he was told by his next door neighbor that because of cowards like you, my children are dead. Well, there's no possible way for her to know that. There's no possible way for any of that. Exactly. But it's this honor shame. He had brought dishonor, and our country is falling apart because of cowards like this, the people who don't fall in line with the honor and shame scale of here.
Dishonor on you. Oh, wait,
but that was one of the things that when I was reading the show notes, I wanted to comment on. Yeah. But I couldn't quite get the words. An issue that I see is it's cultural assumptions.
Yes.
That because one guy wasn't in a plane, crashed into something else, now everyone's dead. Like, because you didn't shoot at the big scary monster, everyone's dead, and it's your fault. Because you didn't meet my expectation. Yeah, go on. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, I'll use this. I'll use this quote. I listened to a podcast. I forget the podcast is called Hardcore History. I forget what series was named, but he talked all about the Japanese leading up to World War II and through World War II, and basically their rise and essentially how they lost. It's incredible. But one of the things he kept saying multiple times throughout every episode is he talked about the Japanese culture, and he'd go, the Japanese are just like everyone else, just turned up to 11. And it was this idea, this mindset of, you're right, it doesn't make sense from our culture, definitely from American culture of expressive individualism, that, come on, dude, you not shooting Godzilla, one little guy, is what made all these people die, and then the nuclear bomb going off. It's like, it doesn't make sense in our mind, but from the Japanese mindset of that. And so when Christ now owns you, he owns your life now, and it is better to be thought a coward by your own culture. And I'll qualify it with this: if you are doing what Christ commands. And so the big disclaimer there is also, Jesus also hates cowards. He also hates cowards. I mean, just read Revelation. One group that's excluded from the kingdom is cowards. And
well, if you deny me, Right. If you deny me before men, I'll deny you before the Father.
Exactly.
Like, just think about, like, it'd be so easy. It's like, well, hey, like, what's the big deal if I deny to get out of this circumstance? I could like think about the rationalization we each could do.
Exactly.
And Jesus would define it as cowardice, right? That's like, oh wait, okay, this guy's in my face. He's got a gun to my head. Well, if I deny Christ in front of him, I'll live, and then I can go evangelize more people. It's like, no, that's not. And then, well, what will it avail me to say I believe in him and get shot in the head? Well, you're holding true to your principle.
Yeah. Like, there's the other question is, how do you know he's actually going to shoot?
Right. How do I know God won't intervene?
Yeah.
Or who knows? Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's one of those things where, and now being owned by Christ, is he actually does define cowardice differently. And so it's like we can.
Yeah.
I mean, he would define in some regards. I'd imagine he'd define fighting in a war and crashing your plane into the enemy just because your government didn't want to provide ejection seats. That's a form of cowardice. It's not willing to go against your culture and be brave and go, no, what this culture is saying is a good, quote unquote, honorable thing is actually a bad thing because it's wrong, destroying life. It's destroying life unnecessarily. Yes, it's war, and everyone comes up with exceptions for things that go on during war. But the fact of the matter is, Christ now says what is and is not cowardice, and it's better to be thought a coward by your own culture if you are actively, following Christ. Yeah. And so this mindset, honestly, and I wasn't quite sure how to fit it in at this one section here, so I just, it's a little bit more tangential here, but this kind of view of this honor shame is kind of what had gripped Japan itself, or Shikishima's mindset, I should say. It's kind of had what gripped Japan itself in this, in this movie, and even as they're growing out of that towards the end of the movie, and they're starting to be like, yeah, our government's lied to us. They've done this, they've done that. No one's coming to help us. They even provide the right response by saying to have never seen war is a good thing. That is a good thing. Yet they still had that mindset of, they still had the Shikishima mindset of, well, us warriors, we have to go take care of it because we're the ones, after all, we're the ones that are still responsible for what happened back in the day. So they leave good, able-bodied men who want to go to fight, who want to save their land from this existential threat. They go, no, the warriors got it. And really what it was, all those warriors at that time were all doing penance. All of them were doing penance at that point. And it was, and really what made the thing successful at the end was all of the people who had never seen war coming and helping, and if you want to view it this way, building culture, building the culture back up and saving the culture from its own destruction. And that's to say that the message of the movie overall, I would say, and honestly, even the message of, if you watch Shin Godzilla, it was a very similar message, is that if Japan is going to be saved, it will be through the actions of the citizens, and that's all of the citizens, not just the warrior class, not just the politicians, it's going to be every single one. And even recently, just some of the random stuff I know about Japan is they doubled down on denial of things like gay marriage. And the rationale wasn't that, we hate gay people. It wasn't even from a Christian worldview perspective. Their whole perspective was, we have a falling birth rate. 2 years ago, the sales of adult diapers passed sales of baby diapers for the first time. And so they have a very aging population. They have an incredibly falling birth rate, been below replacement for a decade or two. An economy that's been stagnant for 30 years. And if you have some of those things in the back of your mind as you're watching this and listening to this message, it's a very positive message of going like, we as the individuals need to step up now. We need to take on a little bit more of that American individualism of, hey, we're just going to go and perform. We're going to go and save our culture at the end of the day. And there's good ways and there's bad ways to do it. I suggest doing it the Christian way, which is not quite radical individualism or expressive individual, but through covenant with other members, where yes, it's about individual action and every member of the covenant. Like Paul says, if you don't work, you don't eat. So you have that aspect there too, but you also have the aspect of when you glean your fields, you don't glean all the way to the edges. And so that'd be my corrective, is try to live in more covenant type of relationship versus an honor shame culture, which Japan has been gripped with for eons, or even expressive individualist culture, which America has been gripped with for eons.
Yeah. Well, something I liked about this movie is that they made it complicated in a wonderful way that I thought was that, well, individual and corporate. And that was kind of fascinating to me, because as we've been dancing around back and forth a little bit here, it's like, okay, well, is Shimiziki at fault or is he not? It's like, well, I feel like the movie said both.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that fits a Christian worldview in a cool way, because in one sense, Godzilla is almost a manifestation of his perceived sin and wrath and what he feels is just maybe justifiably coming against him. But it's muddled because it's not all right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because I think the movie makes it very clear that the kamikaze mentality is wrong, and that was externally imposed on him. So he's feeling a shame and a guilt that shouldn't be his. But then I felt like the film, right or wrong, was trying to give us that, okay, but at the same time, so he's a victim of his culture and feeling shame. But then when he fails in what I'd call the Steve Rogers moment, like even if he was going to die behind the guns of that plane, he could have ran over and fired off some shots and distracted Godzilla. Other guys might have got away, while he may have sacrificed his life because the bullets didn't take him down. But he could have done the Steve Rogers jump on the grenade kind of thing. So it's like he did feel a failure, which I think maybe was justified. Like, so you're talking about the cowardice, Eric. But I felt like the movie tried to say, okay, oftentimes I felt like the film was dealing with abdication.
Yeah.
Like he abdicated his post, but in one sense, the government was wrong. But then he abdicated in a moment where he could have maybe helped others. And maybe that part was that then he was wrong. And then, of course, he goes back and winds up, he kind of abdicates taking the full responsibility that's sort of put right in front of him with Noriko and the baby.
Yeah.
And so it becomes, so part of it's because of trauma he's had externally, but what he winds up being that guy that kind of abdicates and won't fully commit to anything. Like he won't commit to Noriko. He won't marry her. So it's like she takes a job in the city. Like, you think about it, like, she wouldn't even have been in the city being terrorized by Godzilla or having to push him out of, like, he goes into the city to get her because she'd taken a job because he hadn't married her. Like, they hadn't, and she's like, I can't be a burden to you forever. Like, he hadn't stepped up. And like, so then even that, so I go, no, she kind of dies. It is kind of his fault. I think he feels the weight of that. Because even his friends, like you're talking about, Greg, they're pushing him like, dude, you should be like, you've got a kid, and the kid's like, Daddy. He's like, no, I'm not your dad. No. And he's like, no, this is just circumstance. It's not. He can't quite commit, and part of that, that's the reality of sinners, right? Like, almost every sinner I know, from me pre-Jesus, like whatever, to people I know who don't love Jesus, like, there's trauma that's been done to us, but then we have our own sins. Like, it's both and so I can't justify my sin based on the trauma, but I don't have to say, well, I don't have to accept all the shame. I thought the film did a great job of saying, like, there's a differential here, and I think parsing that out is where many people suffer.
Yes, yeah.
It's like, it's got to be one way or the other. Either screw you, I don't have to feel any shame. Like, no, some of it's you. But do I have to accept? No, it's not all you. That's where a lot of us live, and that's where a lot of people really struggle. And it's like, this movie, he is such a cool character because he's in a place where I think a huge chunk of humanity is on a regular basis, and that was really cool. And so I think the theme that stood out to me was then the notion of his redemption, but not just his. We already talked about it, like you already alluded to it, Eric. The idea of corporate redemption, of how the whole culture needs to change, because I feel like like he knows the world's way, or we'd say Japanese culture. Like he feels it's wrong, right? He doesn't want to just kamikaze himself. I think that's innately right. Like, that's not the right, we shouldn't be, that's not right. But he also doesn't know the right way.
Mm-hmm.
And so he winds up needing a lot of help from his own screwed upness, but also then what's been done to him. And we get these cool, I feel like we got 3 or 4 gospel glimpses. And it's like, because we get substitution, then we get contrition, then we get repentance, and then we get deliverance. Now that was really cool. Because Noriko winds up basically laying, like he could have died right there, and she becomes the substitute. She's like, I push you out of the way, and I get blown away. Right? I mean, that was her. They had a moment of substitution. Maybe not full substitutionary atonement, but she sacrifices herself so he can live. Like she could have dove in the alley. Like she pushes him. She has no time to save herself. So he has somebody lay down their life for him, even though then, like, yay, miracle at the end. She doesn't actually be dead, but the attempt was there. So there's sacrificial substitution. And then we see Tachibana, the mechanic, right? He sees the pictures. Like, I think that I don't know what he thinks of Shimiziki until, like, he sees, like, oh, he's kept the pictures of these guys and he's been haunted. Like, he sees the contrition in his heart. He sees that Shimiziki is truly sorry for his stuff. So I think we see contrition, and we see that necessary component we want to see in a Christian, in that they recognize their sin and they are repentant of their sin, that is recognized. Like, there's a humility there. And so then we see, like, at that point, then it seems pretty, I'm not going to say easy, but Tachibana, he gives that forgiveness so freely. Like, the designing of the putting in of an ejector seat is forgiveness. I mean, that's just, I don't want you to die. I forgive you. I'm going to give you the keys to life. And that was totally a wonderful little moment there. And like, so Shimiziki doesn't have to die. He doesn't have to atone for his own sins with his own death. It's been taken care of by the narrative, and he actually can achieve victory and live. He gets to hit the button and eject. But then we also see, like, that great component you guys have already alluded to, where the culture comes together. Have you guys both seen Dunkirk?
Mm-hmm.
Where
I have.
Eric, Dunkirk, great movie based on an historical event where the citizens,
I know the story very well, but
they jump
yet.
in a bunch of those boats and they go actually help with the war effort. And it felt like a shout out to Dunkirk. Like, all these tugboats show up, and so his friend. We also see Shimiziki's friends and fellows, the community, equip him. Like, he only gets that kill shot because of everything that everyone else has done up to that point, and so he gets to have a little David and Goliath moment. He gets to be the weak person who's equipped with all the strength that he's needed and the stone via Jet to sort of have this moment to overcome the enemy, manifest as Godzilla, and achieve a very personal and corporate victory. And so, but that's why I think then the movie says it is corporate, like you're saying. It's the community is actually repenting corporately for its warlike behavior. That's so weird, because the first movie, if you go back to 54, I really think it is a subtle slam on, like, you suck, America, Godzilla's America. And I feel like this movie is almost, we had a warlike nature and we need to repent of that. That's a very different spirit culturally.
But even looking at the fact that they all saluted Godzilla at the end.
Yeah.
Like, that, even after the second time of seeing it really struck me of just the, like, it was respect.
Yeah. Almost in a weird way, like the monster, it brought them to a place of self-awareness.
Right.
Which is why, I mean, I think biblically we'd say, like, God has brought nations to discipline his children. God has brought the Leviathan in to teach his people where they are grossly erring. And I get, in that context, we'd be saluting him and not the chaos. But we like that. Yeah, it's like, okay, respect for this lesson. Like, it's a respect for the one, like, you have shown us.
I was going to say that was the folly of the nations that God did use to discipline his children, was They went, we did this. We did this.
Mhm.
And then God was like, oh, and just read Isaiah where he's like, Israel, I'm coming for you guys. You've been doing X, Y, Z. And then he turns around and it's like, oh yeah, Moab and this Ephraim, and I think it's Ephraim. Anyways, those things that no longer exist anymore because God wiped them out. He tells them why. It's like, I'm going to wipe you out because I used you to punish my people justly, and you were arrogant. And you said this was something you accomplished by your own power. And I think what you're saying there in a very small way, obviously, is it's like they're saluting Godzilla, recognizing that in a sense we got lucky. So we got lucky. We won. You were a worthy adversary, and we are humbled by your presence.
That's how I always took it. Yeah. Both times. That's how I took it. Is just you were a respectable combatant. There we go. But it's ultimately it's surface level.
Oh yeah.
Well, but in a sense, they were taught then, like they were taught through the medium that it's like, okay, like we've devalued human life, and now we need to come together and do things in a different way. Like that felt like the narrative to me, and then there actually is some relief, even though, of course, I mean, Godzilla can still regenerate, et cetera. There's always that possibility, but like for at least a season, they have this. It actually reminded me of Isaiah for some reason. Just thinking about war, thinking about warfare, and then thinking about the cessation of it. The verse Isaiah 40 verse 2 came to mind, where it says, "Speak tenderly to Jerusalem, and cry to her that her warfare is ended, that her iniquity is pardoned, and that she's received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins." It's like, all right, you've been harshly humbled, but there is a time where your warfare, like the war's over, and your sin is pardoned. And I feel like culturally, there's that moment where in the movie it feels like, okay, we have relief. Like Shimiziki has relief, the culture has relief. Like there's and so it's cool. They use Shimiziki to make it real personal, but I do think that they are kind of jiving with the Bible in that way, where like the Bible has always been more about the repentance of a people and not a person. Mm-hmm. And I know it's so easy. It's like I swear every other sermon lately, I'm always telling people, like when you read you in the Bible, it's 99% of the time it's plural.
Yeah.
Like quit. It's so easy for us to be individualistic, but it's like that. No, it's always plural. It's always plural, which right, that doesn't devalue the individual. It just means but I am part of the collective. And that's where sometimes that's where Eastern culture, even with all of its honor shame weirdness, sometimes they have that a little better. Like there's like recognizing being part of the collective, or recognizing, because we'd say like we're part of God's kingdom. I'm a child of the kingdom. Mm-hmm. Like it's the kingdom, not the me part. And that's where they like obviously like we can screw up where the kingdom is at and what the kingdom is about, but that's where it should be. Mm-hmm. And I felt like this gets to a very cool sense of community and almost kingdom building at the end, where okay, we need to build the kingdom together, and we all need to team up. We need to get some boats. We need to have our tugboats. We need to waterboard Godzilla. We need to just bring him up and down and up and down and up and down. That was great, by the way. I don't know. That was I felt like that ending was just from a geek out perspective. There's the way that they uniquely come up with trouncing him, even if it is only a momentary put down.
Yeah.
And maybe he'll regenerate into a somewhat nicer form in the future ones that will protect us from other threats. Who knows? Yeah. I don't know where they're going to take the Toho sequels.
Mothra's coming, I guess. I don't know. Although she's more like the anti-hero type. So
yeah, but they're like, aren't they supposed to be like have a symbiotic relationship with one another? Like
we'll never
buds.
Know. Maybe Noriko's weird little burn thing will allow her to like communicate with the kaiju, or we have no idea where all that's going. But obviously, we're geeking out, and there's the thunder reminding us we have to eventually start to move towards some wrapping up. But there may be some other themes or things we need to talk about. But so obviously, this movie, I I think I hope our listeners agree that this movie has some surprising stuff. I don't think we're alone. I've been seeing a lot of people saying it's like Japan is showing us how to do movies again, and I've seen a lot of stuff touting this movie as the best thing since sliced bread, which may be because the movie's awesome. It may also just be because American movies have been in a slump. I have no idea, but maybe. I always think everything's a little bit hyperbole. I think there's still been a bunch of good movies this year, but it is funny that we have 2 movies about the bomb or about nuclear stuff of very different genres that are kind of at the top. But as we sort of wrap things up, then what are some other things that maybe we can receive or redeem? I'll let me throw this one to you guys real quick. But I do feel like, am I wrong in thinking that they weren't saying God, but they were trying to almost make a case that this was a world of providence, and not happenstance? Because they like you were talking earlier, Greg, where they're all like his crew was sitting around they're kind of like lounging around the dinner table, and he made a comment. He was like, they say to him like, "What? Like, why don't you marry her? Why? Like this is obviously like, you should marry her. It's this girl is your daughter." He's like, "No, this is just stuff that happened. It's just circumstances. Like it's not." Like he tries to write it off as if it's just happenstance, and the fact that they've all fallen together has no meaning. And it seemed like his friends are like, "No, these are obviously signs right in front of you that you should move ahead with this stuff." And to me, it felt like there was a subtle message in the movie that they recognized providence. Maybe they just make it as fate or the universe has brought you together. Obviously, as a Christian, I would redeem it and say God's providence puts things in front of us that we should do. But I liked how the narrative, like, I think we're supposed to side with his friends at that point, right? Because like he's like, no, this is just circumstance. There's no meaning behind it. And they're like, no, all signs say this has been put before you for a reason. Do something.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It reminds me of what you were just saying. A mentor that I've had for years, he has a saying that he's told a lot of people. He's like, make a decision and then make it the right decision. So it's like we a lot of times try to focus on, what's God's providence, what's this, what's that, and it's like, my perspective is Calvinist perspective. I go everything's God's providence, so now I just have to live in it, and now I have to figure out. So if everything's already God's providence, then I don't have to worry about if it was a mistake or whatever. I repent of sin involved in the situations, obviously, but yeah, I think we were definitely supposed to side with his friends in that point. I think I'm trying to remember the order. I think it was shortly after that scene is where essentially he prays to the ancestors, or at least he's talking out loud to the ancestors, and also
I can be happy.
It's like, I can be happy, right? I can be happy.
It's right after that. Yep.
And then that's when Godzilla shows up again.
Yeah. So what we've learned, never say, I can just be happy again, because Godzilla will show up. But I think that the struggle with Godzilla films is that the idea of providence is not part of their culture.
No.
And that is the larger struggle, is that even though they're saying, dude, everything's kind of falling into place here, like, you're being a dumbass, like, don't do that. But it's like, but really, like, what we're left with is, I don't know that culturally they would see something being providential, because that would require them to accept Jesus.
Yeah.
Or
at least some kind of official total guiding
like
hand.
Some sort of official, like, there is objective truth.
Yeah, and that's where it needed to be redeemed. Like, as Christians, we'd say, no, like, you need to just go a step further with that. It's Romans 8:28. Like things are working together because someone, God, is actually working them out ultimately for the good of those who are called according to his purpose. And so, yeah, it's one of those things, like, it's like they're halfway there. We just need to redeem it with that little bit of extra pointing toward God.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely some things to reject, right, Eric? I know you had a couple of those.
Yeah. One of the ones I had is, although I believe the film itself actually does go against this, it's still a very ingrained mentality in a lot of people, even a lot of Christians, about the idea of like killing yourself to atone for past failings, or now usually Christians don't fall into this other side, or to appease the spirits of the deceased. Like I said, I believe the film did a pretty good job about that, of particularly the scene of forgiveness. Is like, live, we need you. I've only seen the movie once, so I don't have the quotes down, but essentially it's like, we need good men to live. We need good, like something like that.
That was a bunch of times in the film. A bunch. Yeah.
And so, while all sin does, obviously from the theological sense, all sin does deserve death, God has actually already provided the redemption through the death of his son, so that even the vilest offender can now have peace with him. So while it is important to learn from those who have come before us, our life actually belongs to God, and no one but he can require our life from us. And so as much as we respect our ancestors, we follow the Bible, and we don't move the landmarks of our forefathers, we do all of that. But our forefathers, or even our own stupid sins that aren't actually worthy of death, we can't kill ourselves to atone, or even as much as I love John Wick, probably my second or third favorite movie of this year, we can't go on a John Wick spree, type of thing, unless it's against Godzilla, then you can do that. Yeah, but make sure you eject.
It's not going to end well for you. It's not going to end well for you.
Like, what would happen if Godzilla had crushed John Wick's dog?
Interesting. Well, see, I would go even one further, just to make sure, like, as far as on the reject category, like, because I think we need, the best this film can give us is that the human togetherness can overcome evil. It's like, well, I think we have to go one further. We need more than human will and human togetherness, and even human to human level forgiveness to overcome the specter of war and the death and the pain and the trauma. Like, Shimiziki is forgiven, and he moves forward and he's walking rightly, but I love to point that I make this point in when I updated my book. I added a scene from the Jessica Jones series. I don't know if you guys watched that on Netflix, or now it's on Disney Plus. But she makes a wonderful point when Kilgrave, the character in that show, he's like, well, okay, well, I'm going to do some good now, and that makes up for it. She's like, no, wait, like saving someone doesn't unkill the other people. Like, just doing good deeds, like doing good things from now on doesn't undo the damage. Does not bring people back to life. Like, it doesn't fix those things. So, like, just because we start walking rightly, like maybe Shimiziki he's forgiven and he starts going the right way, like the things in his past that doesn't atone. Like, we still need, simply growing and doing better is not the gospel.
Yeah,
that's what we have to make.
That's the Curious George mentality, right? Like, Curious George burns down the circus, but he helps the old lady across the street, so everything's fine.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Curious George is not atoned for, like that, and
so
we can't fall into the well. Hey, look! Now we've all come together, and we all brought our boats together, and we defeated an enemy together. It's like, but that hasn't truly fixed the problem in the soul, and so that we always have to make sure, as beautiful as it is to see moments like this in movies like this, like, we can't mistake that for true atonement or redemption. And so that's just little things you want to make sure you don't laud so much that people who don't know Jesus think, oh, well, we're all on the same page then. Like, well, no, it's not just do better. And that's kind of the cultural phrase now. It's like, I need to do better. Like, no, it's not just doing better. Like, the atonement's needed, but I think something we can receive and redeem a bit. I love that they kind of have the failure of human systems and government to actually value life or ultimately solve any problems. Ultimately, I liked that there was a negativity toward that, because as a Christian, I don't look to my government to solve my deepest problems or my deepest needs, or to truly overcome evil. And ultimately, like, no human system will do it. It's like there was a negativity toward human government and human kingdoms to fix things. Like, I can actually receive or most of that.
Yeah,
like that's pretty good. Like, yeah, I I want to work toward government that keeps a good civil. As a Christian, I want to work toward helping my community and voting and doing all the things that ensure the most helpful civil stuff that we can have. But I don't expect it to truly fix. I expect it to be Band-Aids.
Yeah.
I'm never going to expect it to cure everything. Greg?
Well, I think one of the things that hands down we need to reject in a general sense as humans on this planet is that you can kill Godzilla. For the record, I need you to know that Godzilla technically died twice in this film. He died at the end, air quotes, right? But he also died when he went down to crush depth because he was powering up, and then they took him down there, and then it crushed him in, and he stopped. He is a force to be reckoned with. He is not someone that can ever be killed because fundamentally the ideas behind who Godzilla is and what Godzilla is speaks more to our nature, our sin nature as humans, and our constant desire to want to destroy one another, that until the Lord comes back, I don't think that you're ever going to kill Godzilla. And if you do, he just comes back.
Well, I think that almost brings up the. It reminds me of a line from Star Wars, right? When Luke has blown up his first TIE fighter in the Millennium Falcon, and what is Han Solo's advice?
Don't get cocky, kid.
Don't get cocky. I think if we think we've put our sin to death, like we can never be, we can never be 100% sure. We should never be so cocky as to like, okay, that now is dead in me. I never need to even worry about it or take caution against it again.
Right.
We're probably setting ourselves up for a fail. You think about whether it's addiction, whether Eric, you already brought up porn earlier in this stuff. People deal with all sorts of substance abuse, or just, I don't know, if we just made Godzilla pride.
Yeah.
I mean, right there, like, nope. I think he starts to regenerate pretty much the minute we have a victory. It starts it starts trying to remanifest.
The process starts all over again. One of the in the book Paradise Lost by Milton, the scene it's a somewhat graphic scene when you read it, but is after Adam and Eve have taken the fruit for the first time. They go and they make love, and then instantly after they're done, they start bickering with each other, and it's this thing is like as soon as you feel like you've licked sin, it's like right back at you again. And it's the same with like this Godzilla is like, oh, the one, we live in a capitalistic world, so of course Godzilla can't die because he makes money. So it's like he just can't die. But two is like it's just like, oh, you're right, you won this temporary victory. But Godzilla's still there. He's going to grow. He's going to go back to the depth. He's going to regenerate, and then a decade, 2 decades, 100 years, who knows? He'll be back because he's a force of nature. He's always present, and he's that constant threat in your life.
Before you know it, your sin is 30 stories high and breathing fire.
Up from the depths.
I'm gonna have to go back and find this cartoon and watch it. Yeah,
I have not. It is of the tremendous, amazing caliber of most shows from the 70s. Like I think even like Scooby Doo. I think like Godzilla probably like runs past the same scenery 3 or 4 times.
Oh wow! Okay, just
go through the doors.
Set pieces being reused over and over again.
Right.
Yeah.
So what is that? I think so there's probably a couple of things to redeem, Eric, you had on your mind.
Yeah, so one of them that I did have as receive, and maybe it's a little bit in the category of redeem is a little bit too. Depends on which way how you want to cut it, but is extending and receiving forgiveness. So like as particularly as Christians, go and lift the burden of sin off of someone's back. I don't mean that in the way that Christ does, where Christ is the only one who can literally forgive sins, but we can forgive those who have sinned against us. In the Lord's Prayer, that's literally what we ask God for: is forgive us the way that we're going to forgive people. And so it's like, we can do that for people. I keep blanking on his name, the main guy. He only lived at the end because the mechanic gave him that forgiveness. He gave him that forgiveness. He lifted that burden off and said, whatever you're dealing with on all the other things, I forgive you. I release you. Go and live now. And so we can show them that while we, as individuals and Christians, we too often try to cover over our own sin and even the sin of others. Their transgressions, we bury them under lying and shame and hypocrisy. But God covers our sins, our transgressions. He does it under grace and mercy. And now as Christians, we do the same thing. We provide grace, we extend grace and mercy to those who have sinned against us, because to point always pointing back to God because of how much we've been forgiven. And if the person's not a Christian, showing them that and showing that they now can have peace with God too, the way that we do.
Amen, brother.
We can't truly be the mercy seat, but Tachibana can at least give the ejector seat. So
exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Well put.
Yeah.
Man, this is that's good stuff, and I hate to, as usual, kind of call us up short, but this is going to be a long episode anyway, and so we could probably talk about Godzilla until the end of days.
Oh yeah.
Yes. And it's hopefully maybe you guys should make yourselves available if we wind up doing some more Godzilla episodes on various films. We do have Godzilla Kong: The New Empire coming up. I'm guessing
98.
both of you.
Something to think about.
Let me guess, Eric. You want to put in your bid for the Patreon supporters to?
Absolutely. Patreons, we are doing Godzilla 1998 in January. Let's do it.
Oh, Matthew Broderick, the only one, with a deeper role than Shimiziki. Or Hank Azaria too. Man, that movie. I'm having flashback. I'm having my own PTSD like Shimiziki now. I'm gonna have to go. I'm gonna have to go cry. But anyways, thank you, Greg, for coming on the show with us.
Thanks for having me, man. It was great.
Hopefully you will also make yourself available if we need more Godzilla experts for future episodes.
Anytime, any film, anytime.
Any film. Okay, that's something to go on. That's you're a geek of many colors. It's very true. So, but thank you again also for our Patreon supporters. And as Eric said, you'll have some opportunities to vote on films throughout this year. And I would certainly be happy to see some more Godzilla, whether we go all the way back to 1954, whether we do something in the 90s, whether we do Toho, whether we do Legendary. There's certainly some gaps to fill. So if that's something you really want to see, hey, I would love to see you do it in the voting as well. But for now, I suppose we should bid thee adieu and sail off into the harbor, or like Godzilla, kind of sail off and just sort of sink down into the water until next time. So, Greg, why don't you do us the honors and take us out with the customary Popcorn Theology tagline?
Until next time, keep engaging movies and media from a godly perspective. And remember, you're not a mindless consumer.
This is Popcorn Theology.
Thanks for watching this episode of Popcorn Theology. For more content, subscribe on YouTube. Follow and interact on social media to help broaden the conversation. Check out our archive of past episodes at popcorntheology.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. And consider becoming a patron saint by supporting us on Patreon, which lets you interact, influence, and enjoy exclusive bonus content.